right, here we are, another episode of Escape Velocity. Today, I'm talking with Chris Gilbert. He is an incredibly sharp software engineer with over a decade of experience building performant, interactive, and accessible websites and applications. Beyond just development, Chris is a deep thinker about the evolution of technology, the impact of AI on creative and technical workflows, and how companies, especially those in traditional product or service oriented industries, should be rethinking their approach to internal tool development and process. He spent a lot of time thinking about the shifting role of agencies, developers, and how AI is fundamentally reshaping our ability to create. So, we're going to dig in on all of that today. Chris, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for
Um,
having me. Sounds good.
yeah,
Let's dive in.
I'm excited to dive in, and we've been kind of having our own convos about a lot of this stuff. But what started happening when you as a developer were just sort of like, hold on a second, this is a game changer.
Oh man, probably the uh, beginning of Q2 last year, stuff started really taking off. 2024. Um, yeah, just seeing some of the tools that were starting to pop up and what was possible versus traditional ways of thinking was just mind blowing. And you know, earlier on there was a lot of doubt that was cast on AI. Especially from the developer crowd.
Right.
Knowing the technology that is working behind the scenes to make all of this possible, it does kind of become hard to believe that it's going to be able to do all these things that we've had these all moments from, right?
Mhm.
Um, what LLMs are doing behind the scenes is figuring out what the next word should be, basically, and tokenizing that and tokenizing phrases and figuring out which tokens are more likely to come next.
Yeah,
So it's not really understanding these deep concepts, but the language model and pre-training it, it's coming up with um, answers that sound great, and oftentimes in coding context are great and allow you to skip forward. Uh, yeah,
yeah. So I think it's with AI, I think we reached this point where, and I think this was the same with code as it was with copy or content. It was like 80% really good, like surprisingly good. And then there'd be
yeah,
20% that was like either wrong or crazy or, like just so off. But it was always it was like, okay, well, if I pull that out, I still have 80% of pretty workable, good stuff in here that I can use to speed up my process, right? Whether I'm using it
absolutely.
to so from a developer's perspective, did you find it first more interesting to have it like review code that you had written, or were you going in and like asking it to write out code and comparing it to what you might have done? I'm kind of wondering what your initial like experimentation process was.
I'm trying to think back because the space has moved so fast, so my
Yeah.
process iterated so much that thinking back that far is kind of hard now. Um, yeah, I think diving in, my first experience diving into it was really, it had made some progress, some solid progress before that point. So I didn't really get into a lot of the GitHub Copilot stuff early on, but dove straight into Cursor, an AI powered editor. Um, and they didn't have a composer at that time, so it was just the chat, right? So it was you would go into a file and you could start chatting with it or query the agent to build directly within the file, and it was making these updates or like adding functionality and then having tab auto completions where I remember writing a script or a script tag onto the page and then having some functionality pop into autocomplete. Probably would have taken about 15 minutes to complete. It knew it instantly what I was about to do,
Hmm.
and just press tab and boom, there it's done. That was kind of like a mind blowing moment for me,
And that's
seeing how
interesting, right?
fast it
Because
was.
you're able to tab along and sort of see it in real time instead of hit submit and it just spits out a whole bunch of stuff. So that seems like that must have been a very like building on like wows as you're watching it complete things and tabbing through them.
Yeah, and at that point, still even there's so much that has happened since then,
Yeah.
where now, going back into that moment in time, it was really crucial to still know what you were talking about because I break down, you said 80-20. I break it down into 60-25-15. 60% of the time, what I'm getting is great. Move on to the next thing, good enough.
Yeah.
25% of the time, it needs a little massaging, which typically looks like interacting with the chat in Cursor and saying, like, I see what you did there, but let's do this a little bit differently. Use this approach instead of that one. Massaging it into something that's closer to what I need.
Okay.
And 15% of the time, it's like completely out of left field. And no, just scrap that. Start from scratch. My prompt was not good enough. Let's start over and see how we can uh,
Yeah.
t- tackle this differently.
So you mentioned how quickly everything has changed. So today, if you were a developer and you'd kind of, for whatever reasons, not really dabbled in it or gotten involved, like where does a developer get started to see if to see the power, to see the opportunity, and to make good use of these tools?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say the tools that I would recommend jumping into right away, if you haven't already, I mean, everyone's on ChatGPT, like everyone's there at this point in time. Um, if you haven't, like, just start asking it questions and playing around with it. You've got to get in and kick the tires. Um, Specifically with a developer focus, like ask it some coding questions, have it spin up an application for something, see how you can interact with it and say like, well, change this to use Tailwind CSS instead of what it gives you. Change it to utilize a different library. See what that's giving you. That's very interesting, and you should have that experience and know what's possible in that context. But then also start working with AI editors. It's a big one. There's only so much that you can do with an extension on VS Code, and a lot of these applications have realized that. So they've forked VS Code because it's under MIT license, and they have these editors that are have AI baked in essentially into the editing experience. So they can do a lot more. Cursor is a really big one. Windsurf is another. Um, Start working with those and start playing with them. I'd recommend probably just go to YouTube and like you'll find some videos on what's what and how to work with it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was just
Um,
gonna say, I know there's been a lot of sharing on X, on YouTube, even in articles on Medium, where other developers are sharing with, how they're getting started or what they're experimenting around with, and do think that's the best way to learn, and what's great is that it's also exciting and new, and, that there isn't any protocol just yet. There's no, dummy's guide to writing code with AI because it's just changing too quickly. So there are a lot
yeah,
of people sharing stuff, which is great.
it's definitely in a very fast space right now.
Mhm.
It's moving along very quickly. I do expect that we're going to see a lot of back and forth between the teams. I think right now the big ones is GitHub Copilot, Cursor, and Windsurf, and they're all competing with each other, and they're all just like back and forth with features. So
Yeah,
until we see
I mean,
someone come up with some IP that's unique that they can defend, I think that it's just going to be a lot of back and forth, and it probably makes sense to pick one and stick with it.
it sort of reminds me of, the browser wars, or, you've got ChatGPT, you've got Claude, you've got, uh, whatever the Bing one is. There's an assortment of very similar, ChatGPT like,
Yeah,
applications to engage with, and each one's a little bit different and nuanced. So I do think it's just about trying them, finding one that just feels good to you. It's got the right vibe. It's kind of angled in the direction you want to go in, and then yeah, just stick in because they're all upgrading so quickly. They're going to be keeping up with each other.
yeah, yeah. And you touched on this. It does feel like those days, and it's very like the excitement you can feel is like those days, like endless
Yeah,
possibilities, and like I felt like we were kind of like in this period where we were kind of stuck in just kind of accepting that like it is what it is now.
yeah.
So it's really exciting to see all of this innovation happening and feeling like it's like the possibilities are endless again.
Yes, I was just telling someone that this reminds me of when I just got started in the world of web and interactive design, digital design, whatever you want to call it. Um, building websites, putting stuff out on the web. And I mean, that was like 27 years ago.
Yeah.
And, the iPhone, like the Flash made things exciting for a while. The iPhone definitely made things exciting for a while. And then there was some standardization, and then accessibility became really important. And that kind of brought some focus. But it was all just kind of it started to feel a little bit stale and a little bit like
Yeah.
rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Um,
Yeah.
and now I think, yeah, the floodgates have opened. So, I mean, how do you see this changing the world of websites as we've spent a lot of time in that world?
In ways that I'm sure we can't even imagine right now. Um, I think it's grown more important recently to, when you're talking about AI, discern the difference between the current state of affairs and AGI.
Right,
Um, you know,
right.
and AGI, I'm less interested in talking about, just because when it truly gets here, by the definition that I think most people should hold it to, it's just game over. Like
Now, when you
uh,
say that, when you say game over, like explain to me what is in Chris's head when he's thinking game over. What's happening with these AGIs?
AI powered agents are performing basically every knowledge work job. They are incorporated into robotics that are handling physical labor. There is very little left over in terms of like typical, like standard jobs. Even white collar stuff is
Yeah,
like just taken over. And what does that look like? Where do humans fit in? What is valued? Um, Big question mark right now, and it's
yeah,
it's it's scary, and I don't think we're prepared for it. Um, Down the same rabbit hole, there's a great episode of the Tim Ferriss podcast where they touch with Chris Sacca, where he touches on this a little bit, and he's
yeah,
just like, "Yeah, I don't know where we go from here." Um, do,
yeah.
do,
It
do,
would
do,
upend everything, right? If you've got robots doing everything,
yeah,
is there
yeah,
even the need? I mean, do we just sit around our houses and get a handout income from the government so we can pay for our food and basic necessities?
right. Basically, yeah, yeah. Are we headed towards the world where it's Wall-E and we're just all on floating chairs and
Right.
robots are giving us everything that we need, or is there some other future? And
Well,
the
here's the thing, right? A lot of things that we do today are because we're trying to address problems. We're trying, and a lot of that's in support of capitalism, right? So if we're doing marketing, brand, a lot of web work. It's to get your message out because you're trying to expand your awareness to get more people to support you or buy your brand or support your cause or whatever it is. Those needs aren't going to just go away. There's still going to be people out there that are trying to cure cancer or, come up with cleaner energy, who
well,
are
those are
trying, I
it's
mean, is
it's
AI going to
interesting.
solve all those problems?
I think it might solve a lot of them. It's interesting that you touch on those 2 points. Um, Something that Chris mentions in that podcast is he thinks we're single digit years away from unlimited clean energy, and that there are AIs that are now working to solve basically a biomedical like medicine, and solving those problems and thinking about them from angles that humans haven't been able to think
Right.
yet, like approaching it from a pure brute force standpoint, trying combinations at speeds that would never be realistic for us to try, where then they can say like, found this, let's go try it.
Yeah.
So it is kind of crazy. Like I think we can solve a
Yeah.
lot.
So with the scale of AGI, just to give it some perspective, right? If you've got an AI right now that can run through a ton of data and just like you said, brute force, look at a problem like a disease, and it can run a lot of different sequences and approaches to see how it might impact that medical situation. With AGIs, you're essentially going to have unlimited uh, simulated test subjects as well as testers, right? So I mean, doesn't it just kind of
Yeah, I would say like right now, any AI that's in that space is likely targeted and running in a very specific
right?
um, area and task.
Right.
With AGI, it's going to have all of the ancillary and periphery knowledge to approach
Right.
from all different kinds of
And each
angles.
AGI that hits a roadblock can spin up additional AGIs to go tackle that particular problem, right? So they can kind of self-populate
Yeah,
to
yeah.
a degree I can't even fathom.
I would kind of like think of the AGI as the central entity that it could then theoretically spawn out instances of other AIs, but it would be the central general intelligence that would have all of the context awareness of basically everything, which is insane to think about.
It is. It is. It absolutely will make your brain explode, and I do think it's too much for a lot of people to even think about.
Yeah, I mean the way that Chris talks about this, this computer can now do something better, faster, and cheaper than most humans.
Right.
If we talk about so it's important to also look at progress, right?
Hmm.
So one thing I want to talk about is the progress of AI and specifically the ARC AGI benchmark test that
Hmm.
we're running all these models up against. There is a model that or a benchmark that we're starting to use that is more advanced and harder to score on. But in terms of what's been used to date, it's mostly the ARC AGI test. So GPT-2 in 2019, 0%. It's not until 2023 that we get GPT-4 that scores 2%.
Yeah.
GPT-4o 2024, 5%. The O1 preview 2024, 21%. O1 tuned high, 32%. O1 Pro, 50%. Now, they just came out with O3, and it's not out publicly yet, but tuned low, 76%. Tuned high, 87%. We're at 87%, where I think the average PhD human will score 85. And all of that progress came over 12 months from 5% up to 87%, 12 months.
That's a lot.
So yeah, this exponential curve, this idea that like we're looking over the horizon of all of past progress. And what we don't realize is if we turn around, our nose is pressed against the exponential curve that's about to take off. You know,
Yeah,
it's
it's like Moore's law times um, with the major, x to the 100 degree in terms of the amount of speed here. So we can't we aren't going to be able to keep up. So at what I mean, we can only change as fast as we can change. So what
right.
happens when the AI is just more capable than we are of adopting it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I don't think it's a chicken and the egg situation, right?
Yeah.
Like, I was having a good conversation with some people about this recently where, like, what do we do in terms of school? You know, um, the comment was made, why are we even sending kids to school anymore? You know, what are they learning? And I kind of take the stance that, what you're learning in elementary and middle school is not going to change. Those foundational skills are so important, learning to learn, basically
Yeah.
that's not going to change. But for the rest of it, looking beyond that, we're kind of in this chicken and egg situation where we need to know how this is going to shake out to know what the jobs are going to look like so we can prepare the next generation for what those jobs are going to look like.
Yeah.
It's going to be a little messy in the middle time.
Well, like you said, the knowledge workers, and a lot of the things that can be done through robotics are going to be, factory work, assembly work,
Yeah.
production line work. That's all going to change. But I mean, I know they're working on robots that can be like in your house doing your laundry, preparing food for you, like basically being sort of your household assistant. I don't know how near that is to being reality, but that's all going to be at this expense. And so, how much is this going to um, really supercharge this division between the haves and the have-nots in terms of our class structure and our economic breakdown in our country and in the world? Because the
Yeah.
people who are going to be losing their jobs and not able to continue to have sort of forward momentum and growth in their professional lives and income levels are not going to be able to afford a lot of the luxuries that the AI is going to be able to provide. But yeah, then what are people going to even be needing to do with their time if they're not sort of overseeing the AIs and
Yeah,
designing more things for the AIs to do?
it's a great question, and I'm not sure that we know yet the answer. It's going to swallow such a larger proportion that it's not just the blue collar workers, it's the white collar jobs that are at
Yeah,
risk now too. It's gonna require a lot of, I don't know, rethinking, for lack of a better word, of how to approach this from a not just a national standpoint but a global human standpoint. how
yeah,
do we how do we handle this? um, if and when AGI does become a thing that exists without a doubt, without question, I think it's more going to be a question of, at least earlier on, is it economically, does it economically make sense?
right. I
Um,
mean,
you know, if you,
I know people for a while were saying it's going to take so much energy to run this stuff, but now you've got DeepSeek coming out and sort of being like, maybe it's not going to take so much.
yeah, I don't know. I'm torn. I want to see that settles.
Yeah,
We have
no,
OpenAI coming out and saying, well, they used our training data.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so we'll see where that comes out. I'm not sure. We'll see. But you know, the O3 model that is scoring at 87%, they're separating that into tuned low and tuned high. From what I've been able to find online, tuned low is basically $20 per prompt on that model.
wow,
Tuned high is 2,000 plus dollars per prompt. So that cost, assuming that AGI is going to be more resource intensive than that,
yeah,
right? Are we able to get the efficiency up to where it's economical for everyday people, or even companies, large companies that are used to spending millions, if not billions of dollars per year
yeah. You've got to
in
really
revenue?
know it's going to be worth it, and it's not going to just spin out of control and go cost you millions of dollars and come back with a bunch of hallucinations, right?
Right. Exactly. Um, so, yeah, I mean, there's definitely an economic question there, in terms of, is it, when it becomes technically viable, is it economically viable?
Yeah, so I mean, you're talking about, and I love that, like thinking about where we're at in maybe single digit years from now.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, there are still people that are like blown away by Midjourney and seeing a generative AI, produce an image. Um, do you feel like this is all just sort of like shiny objects on the road that will soon be forgotten? Or do you think that there is a role where we continue to use these tools for their efficiency, their collaborative nature, their ability to iterate, that doesn't just get, swallowed by the black hole of AGIs?
You know, I said at the beginning that AGI isn't really something that I don't know. I think that we're headed towards AGI, but I don't think that I've yet to see a model. Let me put it this way: I've yet to see a model that works so well that I'm not. I'm stumbling on myself here. Um, I need to see more.
Yeah,
I
I
need
mean,
to
they
see more
haven't
from
proven
a.
it yet. They haven't proven it yet. I mean, I
Yeah, yeah,
understand they've been talking about the hypothesis of it and promising it's coming, and it's always with bated breath, like, "Oh, sooner than we said last time, here it comes."
yeah. And OpenAI is saying that they know how to. They think they know how to develop AGI,
Mhm.
and they've said with Microsoft that they're setting. I disagree with this. They've said that they will know that they've reached AGI by the point when they reach $100 billion in revenue. I think that's completely ridiculous. Like, that's not merit based at all. That's just,
Yeah.
we've made money. Um, so I do think that we have the tools, the skills, and the talent to go build it. I have yet to see something that, I mean, obviously not working as well as AGI. It's not here yet. Um, but I've yet to see a model that kind of is like, oh, it's around the corner, or it's like imminently coming. because
Yeah.
this is so close.
Yeah. I mean,
You know,
there's a lot of pearl clutching happening about AGI right now, and rightfully so, right? I mean, I think it opens up sort of a Pandora's box of questions. But if we put that aside and we talk about, okay, well, what's working well today
yeah, for sure.
that's changed pretty quickly, and
I think
improved
that,
pretty quickly.
yeah,
Where,
so
yeah,
I think that the tools will continue to get better. Um, they will continue to get better. And, from the same standpoint of is AGI economical when it does come around, I'm not sure that it will automatically swallow all of those tools,
hmm,
even though it might be able to do a better job, even using them itself and not being human directed.
right,
Um, I think there's a large possibility that we end up using them ourselves for a while,
yeah,
at least until the efficiency can make it economical.
yeah,
So, you know, what does this mean for dev? Well,
yeah,
first and foremost, I think it means that you're just inherently less productive if you're using it, not using it, and your peers are.
yeah,
Um, from an agency perspective, not using AI over the short to midterm means that you're going to start getting underbid.
yeah,
You're going to get undercut by teams that are able to use these efficiencies
yeah,
and then get work done quicker. Um, and then in terms of like, what do you do with that time? Where do you place that time? How do you think about billing? How do you think about, all these various dynamics? I think that, it's up to each agency to decide how they want to use that time.
yeah. I
But
mean, I think it's it's a perfect time too because it needed to be disrupted. It was too locked into these processes that were like, you know, in these black boxes. And, who are you to doubt that that a dev says going to take this long, and you needed other devs to let you know if it was good, well done dev work, and same thing with creative. It's just all kind of it can get very subjective, and I do think there's going to be some playing fields leveled by all of this, but the efficiency and the collaborative aspect of these tools, and I would say both on the design and development side of it, should benefit everyone, both the client in terms of the speed and cost of working with other teams, should be dropping, but it's still gonna take the right team with the right approach to get quality, right? I mean, you're still gonna have people
absolutely.
that can very quickly turn out shit, and you're gonna have people that can very quickly turn out really good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you're only producing the bar that you're holding it to, right?
Right.
So if you have super high standards, then you're going to hold it to the super high standard and you're going to accomplish that level of work. Um, if you have low standards, you can produce crap, sure, like
Yeah.
probably really fast. Um,
Well, it also, I think it's opening the door in the same kind of way that, that the digital camera did, or the early, like, website builders did, um, or the way that, desktop computers did to the publishing, the print publishing world. It's like the tools are gonna let more people dabble
mhm,
and be able to
for
spin
sure.
up something of their own to be like, "Well, how about this?" Because now I don't need to know Photoshop to go in and create a visual, some different layouts if I'm just trying to, like, capture a mood. I can take language and let that language either generate code that could impact a browser or a piece of software. And I can do the same with visuals and with video, increasingly so.
Yeah,
So I think it just lets a lot more people into the conversation, and it forces everything to compress because you've got to care more about the communication and the teamwork and the collaboration, because you can't hold firm to that waterfall black box handed to black box kind of process,
one
'cause
hundred percent.
there's no more, that doesn't make any sense, and people are gonna break that down whether you want them to or not, which I love, I think
Yeah,
that's a great creative change to have happening,
agreed. Yeah,
but I think that a lot of people are, will point towards the lack of tested, tried and tested validity of some of this stuff and the hallucinations and the mistakes, and sort of say, "Oh, it's just amateur hour, and like anyone who's using this stuff, it's just they're fakers, they're spammers, they're whatever."
I mean, and to those people, good luck. Like you're gonna fall behind so fast. So like, what's new today, right?
Yeah.
Recently, Cursor, and I believe Windsurf has something similar, released their Composer, which is essentially a self-driven agent. I've been working on a project just to kick the tires with these things. And I
Yeah.
said, let me go create a project scoping application. Something that I'm familiar with intimately as a problem, and let me solve some problems. I spent probably 4 hours yesterday just getting the idea out of my head. So looking at what are the data types, what are the actions that users can take, what are the user roles, that kind of stuff. And then what does this look like from a template or a view standpoint? You know, what different views does this application have? And I just got it all out there. And I optimized it, of course, through ChatGPT for clarity and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I was able to then today feed these directions into Cursor Composer and watch it not just spin up one file, but create a whole directory structure, spin up every single file in the application, write all of the code, and solve its own bugs, coming back to me with, okay, I'm done. Here's what I did.
Wow.
A to Z, just start to finish. Now, were there still bugs in the files? Absolutely. But I think for what I did in 5 hours, that probably was a good month and a half, maybe 2 months of work if you did it by hand.
Yeah.
100%. That's just crazy.
Yeah.
Does it need further optimization? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll need to go in and make sure that write user tests and all that kind of stuff. But that's just insane. Like we're at this point now where the functionality, the layout even is just there for prompting.
Yeah.
It's not this manual. It used to be like bricklaying almost, where you like sit down and like write the markup and like craftsman level, like just chiseling away on some marble,
I mean,
and
it was a lot of bricklaying. The whole process to build software or websites or anything digital was a very kind of now that we think about what's possible, it does feel like archaic to some extent.
yeah, but it was a crazy experience just watching that happen.
I'm sure.
I was just like blown away. You're sitting there watching it, and it's just like it tells you what it's doing, what it's thinking about currently, what it's doing,
And that's
and
in
as it,
Cursor.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and as it is spinning up files, it's hitting errors. It's aware of those errors. It's going and fixing those errors before being even told.
Yeah.
And then you end up with a thing that's like ready to go. And if you hit a problem, it just fixes it.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that Cursor will show its thinking. I know it's been really interesting to tell ChatGPT, "Show me your thinking. Walk
Yeah,
me, don't just make changes." But along the same lines with custom GPTs, like, why would you ever be working with a client and not be creating a variety of custom GPTs just for that client work? Um,
yeah,
because you're gathering all this information, you're having conversations, if you're recording them, you have transcripts, you have notes, you have
yeah.
the documents and the information that the client's giving you, you've got stuff that you're going to go out and find, all your own research.
And you can give that custom GPT web access, and it can go out and search the web
Yeah.
and also find stuff,
Yeah.
right? So if there's a knowledge gap, it can go find that. It can search the web even. Um, you know, in terms of using code this way, there's pros and cons, right? And I do think that it is still, like you mentioned, the senior developers are more suitable for this role.
Right.
You still need to know what you're doing. You need to know what's going on. So I would say a couple of things. If you don't understand the code that's being generated, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So, but it's not a dead end. Hope is not lost.
Yes.
You can ask the AI in Cursor, the chat, like explain this file, right?
So
If you don't know what's going on,
it can teach you while it's working with you and for you.
yeah, absolutely. Not at the same time that it's generated code, but like if you go into files after the fact,
Mhm.
you can say, explain line by line what's going on. And it's
Right.
going to tell you, right? So it's also a great way to learn. Um, I think that's going to separate a lot of people using this.
Yeah. I
There's
mean,
the people that are just like want the quick thing, and it's like, do this thing for me. Like I don't want to be bothered,
well,
and
look,
they're going to
I mean,
take it verbatim.
right. How long has, how long have Harvard and Yale been offering free courses? You can get a free education in pretty much whatever you want if you just go find the resources. But people do, they're lazy, they're intimidated. They don't necessarily want to have to learn it. They just want the quick results.
Yeah.
How do you think that's going to play out though with people who need those entry level jobs to have that experience? Maybe they went to school, got a computer science degree, are fairly familiar, but they're not going to get hired into senior level positions. Like, what is this going to
Mhm.
do to that entry level, junior level dev position? And I would say, across the board on anything that AI is touching.
It's interesting. It's one of those areas where I'd say we don't have the answers quite yet.
Yeah.
One area that does occur to me is as these systems get more advanced, I could see there being a lot of value for someone that has a expertise in an area outside of dev where there is low hanging fruit for creating applications inside of that niche
Yeah.
and breaking in that way. Um, but from a pure programmer standpoint, I think it's going to get difficult,
Yeah.
at least in the near term.
I mean, this might be wishful thinking on my part, and just being optimistic. But the one thing that the AI is not ever going to have is its own lived experiences, right? And so if you went to school to get a computer science degree, but you also spent some time over in another country and um, your summer jobs for a while were as a chef and, or, you worked in a kitchen, um, you're going to bring your own unique, and
Yeah.
that's the creativity, right? But you're going to bring
Mhm.
your own unique combination of lived experiences to the table as you collaborate with these powerful tools. And it's going to change the way that you prompt them, the way that you communicate with them, the way that you interpret what other people are saying to you, and then how you're using the tools. And so I think it leaves a lot of room for those things to shine in ways
Yeah.
that they should anyway. Um, and that might be the magic combo of, like, if you're just getting started, like, yes, learn the foundational stuff, understand the code, but also bring your own unique perspective to it.
Yeah, bring creativity, communication, and empathy. Those are going to be highly sought after, valuable things. I think in this
Yeah.
world where
Yeah,
the
we're
technical
not gonna need
skills,
more, yeah, grunt
right,
coders that, when the AI can just do it all.
right, exactly. Um, I would say understand the tech stack for sure, and have a general idea of best practices when you go into something. That's huge when you're using something like Cursor Composer. Like
Where can people learn about that? I mean,
it really comes down to experience and just getting your hands dirty and
Mhm.
jump into it. And there's no better place to learn than this right now. you
Yeah,
know like jump into Cursor and just have it spin up a project, but then have it explain to you everything, like until you understand it, and make edits and figure out how those edits play out and the impacts they have, the downstream impacts. And
yeah, I think that
there's
I've seen a lot of people go into an AI environment and they'll just type one thing, one sentence, and it'll spit something out, and then they'll go, "Oh, that's cool." But I've seen people who will spend a day
Yeah.
communicating back and forth with the AI, iterating, adjusting, pivoting, adding, restarting at times. But you've got to, I think, really you've got to be able to curate what it comes back to you with so that you don't
Yes.
get overwhelmed by the volume of data or visuals or whatever, because it can spit out so much at you so quickly. So you've got to be so discerning about which ways you want to tweak it and have it go.
Yeah.
Um, but you got to stick with it. It's not a quick fix to get it to really do its best. It does take some work, but again, spend that day and you might have something that would have normally taken a month.
Right. And depending on your personal learning method of preference, you might get a lot out of that. But yeah, there's no shortcut, right? There's no shortcut for experience. So just getting that experience in is huge. And then, you know, I wish that this existed when I was learning, quite honestly, because I didn't have this thing that I could just ask endless questions of. You
Yeah.
know, like I had the questions, but like Stack Overflow, right? Like searching Google was the extent of it. So yeah, if you have questions, like you have this unlimited resource, it's never going to be like, oh my god, stop asking me questions.
You bring up an interesting topic, right? Search.
Yeah.
I don't find myself going to search nearly as often as I find myself going to Chat GPT these days.
Yeah,
Um,
or even using stuff like Perplexity,
yeah,
which is like much better at just general search, I find, especially if you have like a specific thing that you're looking for. If you're looking
yeah,
for a specific product or you want to find the best X or, like stuff that might involve like a low level of research,
yes, yeah.
it's so
Perplexity is
much better,
amazing.
It's not just like, oh, here are 5 articles that say they've got the best travel spots, like it's
Right.
doing some research from that data and then coming back to you with like, okay, here's what people say is the best. um, Another one is Reddit just released a AI platform called Answers. So if you've
Oh,
ever like gone down a Reddit rabbit hole trying to find
yeah.
like the perfect, it has all of their data like basically
Right.
trained on, so yeah, it can just like summarize you a good answer.
So for people that spent a lot of time and money worrying about SEO, so they'd show up in search results in Google. Um, is has the game changed now, like to where you really need to think about how the AI is going to summarize your content or weave your stuff into its
Mm.
answers or make sure your content is on Reddit? Um,
It's
it
a
just seems
good,
like the
yeah.
findability for things is changing.
Yeah, for sure. So initially SEO was like, keywords and all of that
Yep.
jazz, right? And then it shifted. And I think this is a shift in the same direction, but even further, right? Like content is king now. The more relevant your content, the more likely it is to get pulled to the top.
Mhm.
I think that's just underscored even more with this. If you have relevant content, the AI should scrape that and then be aware of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting in Google now to see the AI summarization answers above
Mhm.
the actual search results. And, that's not sponsored, nobody's paying for that yet, um, but
Right.
it's just opens up such a can of worms.
Yeah, and I think they actually need to go a little bit further down the path of what Perplexity is doing if they're going to stay competitive. Just offering up these like summaries and not doing any kind of research or digging when it's being prompted with a literal question just seems a little bit like a
Yeah, well, I'm sure that, they are all racing to
fail.
improve.
Yes,
It's quite the race.
for sure.
What are your thoughts? I mean, I know you're a fan of Apple products.
Yep.
I've just been so disappointed with, Apple
Yes.
Intelligence and Siri. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
Apple, like
Yeah. Same. 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 And I know they just hired a new role to or put someone new in the role to see
Yeah.
over all of that. So maybe we'll see some progress here. I don't know. It seems like they kind of like went AI light and then pulled in open AI as like a
Uh-huh.
fallback, you
Yeah.
know? Um, I don't know. Apple has traditionally though done impressive things when they've been kind of like put into the underdog position, you
Yeah,
know?
and they're
They
maybe
don't
2nd or 3rd to the game. Yeah.
they don't respond well to being in that position, and they really go all out to kind of not be when they've been put in that position. So I'm curious to see what they respond with, because it's very clear that Apple intelligence is not
It was
living
a
up
big
to the
nothing
competition.
burger. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah,
it's like, oh, there's a lot of hype for nothing.
yeah.
Um, but, back to your, thoughts on, like, will we even be using, monitors and screens
Oh yeah,
and that sort of thing? I thought Apple Vision Pro was a really interesting look at moving in that direction with VR and AR and all of that. But even just the need for interfaces, the way that we've typically been thinking about them, that
yeah,
could all really change in the near future.
yeah. I think it depends on can we get a form factor and price
Yeah,
for hardware that makes sense for mainstream users. I would love some glasses similar to like the form you're wearing now, where I could get some AR for
yeah,
that.
yeah,
I'm not sure if sitting at my desk with goggles is exactly where I'm at right now, but um, I know some people that do it. So it's definitely coming. I think they're only going to get slimmer and better. But yeah, once that's there, like what happens? I
mhm,
think computers and monitors disappear from desks first. And then if you're thinking about a VR context, like what do websites start looking like? A
yeah.
lot of the flat 2D representations kind of like, I wouldn't say they fall flat, but they're not limitations anymore.
I think one of the biggest changes is how we've historically just structured websites, and we've kind of locked into this very formulaic and very, it's like a library system or an index of a book. I
Yeah.
don't think people are engaging with information the same way that they have been, and I think that will continue to change in really interesting ways. So I think the whole notion of, like, information architecture and navigation is is just gonna feel like, again, like laying bricks,
Yeah.
when that is not how we are consuming information. Everything is getting a lot more conversational and run through these chat GPTs and things like that. So, I'm excited to see what changes there.
Yeah, for sure. I think that a couple of things come to mind. One is that I think the experience is going to become a lot more cinematic and not just a flat,
Yeah.
screen. Basically, I imagine, what comes to mind is like the NBA website and like being like surrounded and immersed in like a cheering stadium,
Yeah.
with that energy and how that hits you, and versus how a website can hit you.
Yeah.
It's night and day, right? Suddenly you're on the ground floor, looking at this gigantic stadium full of people. Um, that's I get chills just thinking about it.
I know. If they
Um,
can get the form factor right on that and the price point, who's gonna want the screen over that?
right. I think we might see something in the way of a custom navigation, but I think voice is going to go a long way there.
Mhm.
Not many people, myself included, like to use voice for navigation, but I think that is the medium that it's going to take to get that more mainstream.
Yeah, I know it's been interesting to watch, like, cars, play around with gesture control and voice control. A car has
Yeah,
been a great automobile industry has been a great place to watch that kind of evolve and succeed or not succeed, and at this point, I do kind of rely on my Alexa to do certain things, but it does seem like it's just so disruptive and kind of clunky at this point.
yeah,
So how do you separate, like, normal life conversation with the conversation that's meant to engage with an AI or an interface, um, without learning a whole new language or resorting to, gestures.
Right.
Um,
And maybe gestures do also play a big part, you know?
mhm.
I could see that as well.
Yeah, and I mean, so many people use the voice to text features on their phones now. I think we're getting a lot more. It's like I'd rather FaceTime and talk
Yeah.
than call. But there's still, there's still some people who are like, I'm going to text. And there's still email. So there's still letters in the mail. So we've got it
Yeah.
all. We've all got it all kind of rapidly spreading out, and some of it's going to condense and some of it's going to cut off. But it's interesting times.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to think where this could go, you know?
Yeah.
What is it going to look like when we don't have any desks and it is all just AR and VR? And I don't know. I'm mostly curious to explore and brainstorm on what we've traditionally thought of as websites look like. And are they even called websites? But like, what does that experience look like when it has the level of standardization that we have for websites today?
Yes. Now, to be devil's advocate here, people have been predicting this shift for the last
Yeah,
30 years, right? And it
yeah,
has not come to fruition. And we're basically now saying, well, because of AI, that shift is finally here and it's going to happen quickly now because of the power of AI. Um, but I think that's rightfully like the jury is out.
yeah,
So we will have to wait and see. Um, it'll be strange if the world of websites goes away. But I'm excited to see what might replace it.
same,
Yeah.
same here. Yeah. Um, Back onto to AI powered dev. You know, I have a
Yeah.
couple other things to mention.
Yeah, go for it.
One thing is that I feel like there's a huge opportunity and a lot of low hanging fruit for internal AI powered applications at companies. You know, and I see two primary use cases for this. One is the product and deliverables focus, and the other is internal processes. And you know, there are a lot of services right now that you can go out and subscribe to handle a lot of things. But I think now more than ever, there's the use case like your dollar stretches so much further for internal app development that it makes so much sense. I mean, there are companies that
Are you talking
I'm
about like
sure.
Proposify versus building your own proposal writing AI?
Right. And I bet if you went to a company, they could probably come up with a long list of applications that they would love to have,
Mhm.
but just economically, cost wise, doesn't make sense to go build that. It's, you know, however much that is. It's it's much lower hanging fruit now than it
Yeah,
was,
absolutely.
especially with AI when you can spin up a full application in 5 hours after spending a day coming up with the planning,
Yeah, I
you
mean, there are
know.
a lot of people saying, this is the death of SaaS, right? Now it's gonna be,
Yeah.
uh, AI as a service.
Right.
You won't go to software
Yeah.
anymore because you won't need to.
Yeah. Like going to like specific to a company, what can you automate? What repetitive action are you taking? What grunt work is required? Where can you insert AI into time consuming tasks?
Yeah.
How would you organize and break down your path to creating products and deliverables? And how can AI not only perform those tasks, but connect them with agents, right? So
Yeah.
it's the same as the cursor composer. You're not like telling it, go do this thing. Okay, now go do this thing. It's here, do this.
Yeah.
And it goes out and just does it all, right?
But see, here's the thing, you are thinking about that. That's what every person I talk to now, especially if I'm hiring someone, a young person in particular, I'm like, "Tell me what you're doing with AI. What are your ideas? Like, what are you playing around with?" Because I want people that are thinking about creative ways to use it
Yeah,
in everything that they bring to the team, and them and their own jobs.
yeah,
So
for sure.
what else are you thinking about?
Mm, the big one, the big other one that I'm thinking about is data management with AI. And we talked a little bit about this, but so many times, in so many cases today, data migrations or content migrations come with data loss. And that might be because of old voice messaging and tone, or it might be because of messy data that just doesn't translate cleanly.
Yeah.
But with AI, I would make the case that you should hold everything, right? It makes sense to have this repository of like all of the content you've ever generated. And maybe you add to that over time. But it probably also makes sense to take these like snapshots, right? And have this was 2025, right? And I need to spin up a page about X, but let me like just ask the AI to do this and use all this historical data and do what you can. And then make that sound as great as you want it to look, right? Or sound. And maybe it needs to be added to, maybe it needs to be modified, edited slightly. You have to input some new, fresh content there. But then you've got that, and that gets cycled back into the repository of that topic X, and it could be organized, categorized, so that it's clean and you can go in and explore it in different ways. But
Yeah, it really adds a lot of
you know,
dimensions to your data, right? A lot of
right.
dimensions.
But this idea of, I can tell you how many times I've built a website and the holdup is content
Yeah,
on the client end.
always.
And right. And how much more efficient would it be to have this repository of data where, you know, maybe it doesn't make sense verbatim, but in a world where an AI and LLM can just say, you can say, adjust the voice and tone of
Yeah,
this
here's the new content
using,
strategy.
right,
Take all the old
exactly.
stuff. Yeah.
Make it new, make it fresh, right? So yeah, I just it's gonna change things, I think, and I
Yeah, ooh,
see
writers are not gonna like hearing that.
I see a huge opportunity for a product there that hooks into content management systems, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, for the dry stuff, um, or for just the informational stuff, it absolutely makes sense, and don't worry, writers, we still need the heart and the human
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
forefront, and not all just the bullshit and the flowers that the AI can churn out. But yes, in terms of the bulk, the heavy lifting, the fact checking, the maximizing your data, it does seem like it's really just having enough people around who have the ideas and know a little bit on about how to do it is that's the only limitation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just going to be such a game changer. I could imagine a product that ties in where you have, you know, a template or a view, whatever it is, and you've got 15 fields that you need to populate, and there's just an auto populate button. It's like take a rough shot at just doing a first messy rough draft of this, and instead of starting from scratch, you're starting from something,
Mhm.
and that's going to be huge for a lot of people. Where, I mean, I was looking at a website the other day that launched like months ago and still doesn't have pages with content. It blows my mind that they exist, but like,
Well, that's because people hold things up, right?
yeah,
It's somebody's job to look at that content and approve the new content or whatever it is, and then it's somebody else's job to move it from one place to the new place. So
yeah,
that can really get slow and tedious. And no one wants to give that up to the AI just yet either. So,
true.
you know,
Yeah, yeah,
it's going to be a big control battle as well.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, how you like, trusting a computer, right?
Hmm.
So,
I know. But I mean, we're trusting them quite a bit already
true.
if we really think
Yeah,
about it. So
yeah,
it now seems like a silly time to stop, but I do think that's going to be a big issue.
yeah. And that's another big topic of we shout out to Reid Hoffman's new book, Super Agency.
Ah, yes.
So it's all about agency and what AI means for human agency and having control and the feelings that we might have about that and how it's going to shift in things. And um, it's going to be a crazy new world.
So that's a good thing to remind me to say that I'm going to try to get all the things we talked about referenced on the podcast's website, which you can find at helloadeo.com, and look for a shout out to escape velocity, or we'll try to add it to the notes on the Spotify or the Apple podcast page as well, because we talked about a lot of things. And I'm sure if anybody's listening in their car, they're like, I can't write, I'm going to crash, you know? Um, so we'll try to get all those details out. Chris, is always fascinating talking to you. So thank you again for giving us your time and your thoughts. And I feel like we should put this in a time capsule and revisit. We should revisit this conversation in like a year and see
Yeah.
what's, yeah, let's give it a year. All right.
Awesome.
Well, thank you
Thank you
so
so much.
much.
Yeah, no, thank you.